think first time I started bouncing the ball, I was 5 years old, and ever since then, my dream has been to get to the NBA. For me, it's almost life and death. That's how bad I want it, and that's what I strive for every day. Leave nothing out there on the floor and go home with no regrets. Having to go through the fire and having to get it the hard way and take the bumps and the bruises and nothing given to me, everything earned, and had to get it the hard way and the long way and all of those things, it makes it so much sweeter to be at the top, knowing what it took to get to the top. You can appreciate the journey so much more. And so just to be here as an NBA champion is nothing short of amazing, and it's something that I hold on for a long time, and I'm only 3 years in, so I got a lot more to do, but it feels pretty good right now.
Welcome to episode 5 of Inside Open Gym. We're recapping the latest episode of OG, the origins of Fred VanVleet. We have with us today Blake Murphy, you know him from Raptors Republic and The Athletic. Welcome, Blake.
What's up, man? How are you?
One of the only men to rival me in the beard game, so I'm glad to have you on.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
And as well as Randy Urban, you all know him, a producer of Open Gym. Welcome, guys.
Hey, man, that's good.
Randy, you growing it?
That's 5 days right there.
5 days. It's looking good, man. Randy, I'll start with you. Fred's story, from a storytelling perspective, how does he kind of stand out from the rest of the players that you guys have kind of touched on and interviewed and told their story?
Well, I think when you look at the Raptors roster as a whole, it's more or less an underdog story from top to bottom. But Fred's is like a classic underdog story. Undersized from a tough area, wasn't given the chance, played great in college, passed over in the draft, makes the team as a 15th kind of guy, becomes a backup. Now he's starting. Like, there's nothing else there that you'd want from a storytelling perspective. And he's a great guy. So, I mean, the Raptors are unique in that they don't have this kind of guy that really, started from the top. Now he's here. They all sort of started from the bottom. But Fred's is remarkable because he's like us. That's what I feel like with Fred. Like, he's the same height as us. He could shoot probably a little bit better than you guys. Not me, but I was kidding. But like, it just feels like Fred's one of us. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
And Blake, what about yourself? You have a lot of interactions with the team. You want to chime in on kind of your thoughts and opinions of Fred as not only a basketball player, but as a man?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Fred, for our purposes and for fans' purposes, is that he's genuine. There's no BS to him, really. I'm sure if he were on this call, he would have cut Randy off as soon as Randy started talking about his own jump shot or him being like us, and there would have been a few F-bombs there. And I think, I think that plays into, his popularity for one, but also how easy it is for someone like me to tell his story or for the Open Gym crew to tell his story. He is so open and so honest about those things, and his interactions with teammates are genuine. His interactions with the media are genuine, which is, something you don't want to measure a guy by just the quality of his quote, but you can tell that he's being honest with you. And I think that creates this level of relatability and accessibility for people. And that's why, when I talk to a lot of Raptors fans who became new fans during, if not the finals run, the last couple of years, and we did a big fan survey at The Athletic and recently, and this Boro too, a lot of new fans have gravitated toward Fred as one of their favorites. And I think that's why he's accessible and he seems real. Not that the other guys on the roster don't, but sometimes NBA guys and professional athletes, they have this air of, they're unreachable. You can't possibly relate to them. And Fred has that kind of genuine quality that people can attach to.
Yeah, when I said he's like us, I meant that very loosely. I mean,
look, I've seen your jumper, man. You're the closest of the three of us for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
Hey, Randy, watch out. He may call you out just like he did that kid at the MLSC Launchpad who said he wanted to take a one-on-one.
Yeah, well, when I talked to him, I did this interview with him not too long ago for NBA XL, and I said, Fred, we're like the same, both underdogs, but they were just right with me. you know? And he thought that was pretty funny. Like everybody just got it wrong with Fred from the beginning, from the start, from when he started playing basketball till, I mean, nobody's getting it wrong now. He's going to get paid.
Blake, here's your opportunity to either suck up to Randy or expose him. My question to you is, what's your opinion on Open Gym, the impact of their storytelling, and how they tell their stories?
Hey, Blake, we use you, so be careful.
Yeah, my favorite episodes are the ones that I'm in.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great. I think it's, obviously from a Raptors fan perspective, that level of access and understanding of players is kind of unprecedented. We saw how much everyone has latched onto The Last Dance these last 5 or 6 weeks. And, Open Gym is the closest thing to a modern, in real time look at how a team operates like that, with a little bit more balance to the storytelling maybe too.
Yeah.
So I think it's huge. And I think what that does for the fans, obviously, and the players is kind of tighten that relationship where sometimes there's this level of separation. And that level of separation is normally where someone like me in a media role, that's part of the role, right, is to bring the fans closer to the players. And Open Gym does a great job of that. And then from my perspective, what it helps do, I think, longer term is, these players they go through the experience of having Open Gym in the locker room and in these intimate team moments. And I think that helps create, a lot of players come into the league or develop this sort of like arm's length with the media or distrust of media. And I think that Open Gym being as successful and as thoughtful as it is, kind of shows these guys that, there are going to be times where if you play bad, I'm going to have to write, I analyze, I'm going to have to write that you played bad and contextualize that. But, for the most part, we're trying to help tell your story. And Open Gym, I think, helps solidify that idea for them and helps open them up a little bit. A guy like Fred's maybe a poor example of that because he's so open from the start. But you look at a Terrence Davis or even a Pascal Siakam compared to where he came in the league, and you can kind of see how that comfort level and familiarity that I think the Open Gym guys help with a lot makes my job easier.
Now, before we kind of take a deep dive, guys, into kind of the Fred's story and the origins of it, let's quickly flip it to another great one-on-one interview with Matt Devlin and Dan Tolzman, the assistant GM of the Toronto Raptors and VP of Player Personnel. Take a listen.
When you think about Fred VanVleet, Dan, what are the qualities that he possesses that makes him someone that can excel within the framework of the Toronto Raptors?
I think that he's like the perfect embodiment of the type of player that we've had success with. I mean, so many of these young guys that have come up with our program and are a big part of the success we've been having, they have such a will to win versus, pretty much anything that's personal accomplishments based. Like, it's all about the team winning and the success of that over anything that they do themselves, because I think they all have like a mutual understanding that the better success we have as a team and a franchise, it's going to help them out long term, and they'll be taken care of, and all the accolades and stuff that comes with winning. Like, I mean, the all-star voting is such a clear indication of if you're on a losing team, it doesn't really matter how good your stats are. Usually, like, it takes putting a team first to really have the success. And I think that he's such a good example of that, along with the fact of just being so tough and so hungry and just out there to try and get better every year. That's something that we look for in a lot of these guys. And they come in and they see other guys doing it, and it just, fuels them to be the best that they can. It's been really good for us.
When you think about Fred, his 4 years at Wichita State, what they were able to accomplish, and he goes undrafted, yet he didn't seem unfazed by it. It was almost like, okay, I'm ready for this. How quick were the Raptors on the phone? I think it was within minutes, was it not? Giving him a call and saying, hey, we got a spot for you.
No, I mean, it's funny. It's like because we didn't have a second round pick that year. And so it was probably like as the 30s picks were coming off the board, I was already in touch with his agent. Like, we had a constant communication throughout much of the second round of just knowing that we're there for him if he goes undrafted. And I think it probably had a lot. Like I don't think he went undrafted because every other team missed him. I think that it was some of their doing of choosing to go undrafted, because I think that happens with a number of players of that talent. And I think, just that constant communication of just saying like, hey, just know, like, if you're still there, like and we showed that interest from very early in the process, to where they knew that come draft night, we weren't just reaching out trying to fill a hole. Like we had been there from day one, expressing that interest, and it went a long way come draft night.
The culture that Masai, you, and Bobby have created has allowed for this. So how do you have this ultimately a situation where you're able to, with the 905, draft, also get undrafted players, develop, and then also with the Raptors, you have that ability to win as well? It's easier said than done.
It just helps to sell players on playing a role for the team and excelling at that role for the betterment of winning, when you can actually show results at whatever level it is. And it goes a long way. And it takes a lot of player buy-in, and I credit the players to seeing the bigger picture and knowing that if they get really good at something that will help them on, if it's the 905 level, you can kind of see yourself being plugged in on the main Raptors level and doing the same thing, with time and development. So it takes a certain type of player to see that and buy into that. And we've had a lot of success with bringing in those types of players who are willing to sacrifice some early to get it back later.
In fact, there are three examples: Fred, Pascal, and Norm, who were a part of a championship run at the 905 level, and then a significant part of a NBA title run. And so when you have both of those, how much did that 2017 run in the G League, how much did that assist the 2019 run in just a development path for those three players?
It's completely different when you talk about the magnitude of it, but it's a very much like a microcosm of what it takes to win as a team and how to kind of go about it. And it's interesting, the thinking about the similarities of the two runs, because it was that 905 team was so talented, and our Raptors team this last year was so talented, just from high end talent. That's when you have a mix of that, something special can happen, And then it was the 905 was so well coached, like just what Jerry Stackhouse did with that team and that roster, and how to move, different parts throughout the year back and forth. It was pretty good. It was pretty impressive. And then, everyone knows what Nick Nurse did for the main team this last year. So it's stuff like that there's a reason why you can have success when you have that going into it. And then, both teams were just so defensive oriented. And I think we're proving that you can always be relevant and have a chance at competing for a title if you lock in defensively. And I know not many teams thought we would be where we are this year, but it's just because we're still such a good defensive team. And the 905 did the same thing. The year after winning the title, we had one returning player, and everyone thought we would be nowhere, and we got back to the finals the next year. So it's if you can approach it with a similar mentality of locking in defensively, let your talent shine on the offensive end, and then just have some really good coaching to kind of put it all together, it's a recipe for success for sure.
And so I take you to that moment on the podium where there you are, with the Larry O.B., Fred VanVleet, and you look around and you see these players that the organization has drafted and developed. And what was that moment like for you to see the work that had been put in, and then here you are at the top of the game?
Yeah. the easiest way to describe it is just surreal. Like, it's the type of thing where as a kid, you watch those ceremonies, you know, I was the type of guy that, as long as I can remember, you watch the finals and you even if you don't have your team is playing, like, it's still, you're caught up in the moment. And then you always watch the trophy presentation afterwards, and you just, the confetti and the, you know, all that, the t-shirts and the hats and everything. And then so to be in that moment and being in the chaos, which is so underrated, like the amount of just chaos that's going on afterwards, it's wild. And I like to, it's so funny, like to this day, I keep thinking how I was so caught up in the moment of just like experiencing it. I turn around and like the big team photos going on, and I'm like in the back corner, like have no idea that this photo's going on. And so everyone, when they talk about like, oh yeah, where were you in this? Like, man, I'm like, I don't even remember where, like nowhere near. I had no idea a photo was happening just because it was like, there's so much going on.
They got to Photoshop it. They got to Photoshop
it. But then that's the thing is you're hugging everybody. You're just experiencing with everybody. But then, like all those guys that we went through the process of bringing them in and seeing them as unbelievable competitors and players that we knew they could get to see them help us get to this point. I mean, I just said thank you to everybody, because it was like everything that we've been chasing, that I've been chasing my whole career, like to have this group of guys be the ones to make it happen. Like it's huge, man. It set us all up put us on a different level. And now I think everybody is just twice as hungry to try and experience that again, you know?
Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate you doing this. We know that you're in the middle of the draft preparation, and so you have a lot going on. So thank you for taking the time to join us and explain to us and share with us the Raptors 905, the development path, Fred VanVleet, and at the end of it, winning it all and looking to win another one. So thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. All the best. Be safe, okay?
You got it. Same to you.
All right.
I just want to thank, obviously, ownership, the entire Raptors organization. You know, these guys sitting next to me, Bobby, Masai, Dan Tolzman, the entire management team for making this thing possible, for taking a chance on me as an undrafted kid coming out of college. Obviously, thank my family. I'm not going to talk too much. Y'all going to have me up here crying.
Blake, how has Fred's story kind of impacted the draft process and the way teams and leagues look at recruits coming out of high school and college, would you say?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And Fred's impact is perhaps most noticed on the player side, where you have a guy like Terrence Davis go through the draft and say, well, I looked at what Fred did and I bet on myself. And, you know, Terrence Davis has been open that there were a couple teams that were interested in him in the second round, maybe for one of those two-way contracts, but he didn't want to take one of those. So he kind of nudged teams not to take him unless they were seriously interested. And that's the same thing that Fred VanVleet did. So, you know, Fred came along. That was the last year that there weren't two-way spots. And I think he kind of offered the mold for some of these fringe draft guys to control their own destiny a little bit more. And that's obviously, you know, it's obviously a risk. You then have to make a roster undrafted, go through the summer league and training camp process and stuff. But for players with that sort of mentality and that sort of, I was slept on, I believe I'm better than what the draft said, Fred's kind of created the template there.
Do you think, Blake, that they look at Fred for, you know, as a 4-year guy and say, you know, maybe seniors isn't so bad? I mean, we just got off watching The Last Dance. Jordan played, 3 years in college? Like that would never happen now. And that might be a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, you know, theoretically, if a guy's done 4 years at a more major school, in terms of his development runway, maybe he's further along that. And I talk sometimes in my analysis about things like development curves and aging curves, and the further along you are on that, I think the perception becomes that your ceiling's a little lower, and maybe these older prospects are high floor guys but lower ceiling guys. But there are different qualities that you have to look at there. You know, DeLon Wright was a little older, but he'd only played 2 years at a major college. Norman Powell was a little older, but he'd spent 2 of those years in a pretty small role off the bench. Things like that. And then obviously from a skill perspective, you look at a Siakam and it's okay, if he can tighten all this stuff up, what could he be? So I don't know. I'm always torn on it a little bit, because I do understand that if a guy's, if we have 4 years saying this guy is this, it's tough to bet too hard on you being able to do something with them where the light bulb just goes on. But also, I think teams need to be realistic about the fact that an old prospect is like 22 years old, and you're talking like 10 to 12 years of potential NBA career there. And then if you're a win-now team like the Raptors, what might be attractive about a guy like a Fred VanVleet, who's a little older, is that he's closer to his years where he can contribute for you. You don't have to wait 2, 3, 4 years for him to kind of reach that level where you can play him in the rotation. So it's going to vary by team, but I think especially with more established winning teams, that older prospect really shouldn't scare them off that much.
Randy, you talk to him off the court as well. You film him, you document his journey, and similarly kind of his demeanor off the court. Do you tend to sometimes take some learnings from those situations, and does it is it a little bit eye-opening for you when you see guys and maybe they're a certain way that you didn't necessarily picture before you got a chance to kind of go behind the scenes with them?
Well, I always think that the players, they're private guys, but like what we've been talking about with Fred is he's the same. Like, that's just what he's like. He's a chill guy. I think he's probably, like all the guys, are a little funnier than maybe we get to see. I think in a room full of, their contemporaries, they're a little different than they would be, in a room full of, media people, because they just know that, whatever they say or do is going to be put out there within reason. So I don't know. I think with Fred, him just being the same kind of a guy, he's just the kind of guy like you just want to try to crack. You want to try to make him smile. You want to try to, but he's always very comfortable. So it's hard. Like, it makes your job a lot easier when someone's not being, they're just being who they are, right? We go to his house. He's just being who he is. He's not putting on anything. This is how he is. And it makes our job completely easier.
We all know him as being the stoic, stone cold, steady Freddy type personality, right? Can never really be knocked off his game. But we saw in the last year's playoffs early on, he wasn't really his true self, right? And it took him a little bit of time to get going, and eventually really started to heat up in the Bucks series, and we all saw what he did in the NBA Finals. He mentioned it a little bit to some reasoning behind that in the episode. Do you think that he actually lost his confidence for probably the first time since we've seen him in a Raptors uniform? Or do you think maybe it was literally just the styles of play and the matchups that presented themselves?
I think basketball players' confidence can be fragile. Fred's is probably the least fragile out of a lot of them, but I think definitely he was shook there for a while, because when you stop making open shots, that's when you start to second guess, is it the matchups? Is it me? Is it the moment? What's happening here? And, in the second half of the Milwaukee series, he did break free. It's not like Milwaukee got shorter, in the second half of the series. So he broke free, he made shots, and Golden State has always been an elite defensive team through this run. So I tend to feel like he did have a little bit of wavering, and with the birth of his son, I just think he was kind of like, you know what? It's just basketball. Just shoot it, just shoot the ball. That's all you got to do, and not worry, and live with the results. And look, those guys, they practice so hard that, Michael Jordan said in that doc, you put so much work in to eliminate that doubt, and I think a guy like Fred has, without those physical gifts that MJ had, has that same type of work ethic, and I think it paid off there. It wasn't fair, I thought, though, during the playoffs, because people were saying, it is what it is. He's this type of player. He can thrive under this environment, and maybe he's just not fit to play a team like Philadelphia, and that's fine. That's some players, and I just thought that wasn't fair, and I'm so glad that he, shunned those criticisms and put an end to that with his play.
It's tough, too, because, when you're in a playoff series, no one wants to hear that, he's only a third-year player and he's going to get better at all this stuff, too, because everything's so immediate. But, that's like the finishing and the finishing against length. Those are all things that, it took Kyle till his fourth or fifth year in the season to get better at, too. And, it obviously the way that Fred was able to bounce back, especially from outside, speaks the world about how much faith you're going to have in him to figure those things out long term too.
Randy, when you guys with Open Gym are following these guys and you go from kind of I wouldn't say a relaxed regular season schedule, but you're now kind of that inside access during playoffs, which we all know, Blake knows from an outside perspective, everything gets really tight, really serious. And how do you guys as a crew kind of manage those complexities of the postseason and trying to tell maybe an off-the-court story or a storyline that you guys have identified, but then balance it when guys are in those high-stakes games and their performance sometimes could wane up and down?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the conversations we have a lot. Like, one of the shots that we like to get is from the parking lot when the guys get out of their car, and that's something we do traditionally for the beginning of the season and then for the playoffs. But you're almost like, I don't want to put any more pressure on these guys. Like, should we be down here? Are they going to be like, oh, is this throwing off their routine? But guys like some of the veterans, they just go with it. Like when I go back to last year, like Danny Green, he doesn't care. He's coming out of his car, he's talking to you, making jokes. These guys are professionals. When they get inside those lines, they know how to perform, and it doesn't matter if the camera was there before or not. So. But it's definitely questions we have to have, like we're not doing certain things in the playoffs that we would normally do. There's way less ride-alongs or that kind of thing. It's just everything's tight. You don't want to be one of those things that somebody can say, hey, it was because of that the shot didn't go in. So you're definitely having those conversations.
I don't think I've been as fired up supporting a team as I was when Fred in that game 6 flexed and let go that almost Serge Ibaka-esque scream. And Randy, you said it. Your guy's goal half the time is to pull some emotion out of this guy because he's so stone cold. And when he did that, I mean, from my perspective, working, I could only imagine what back home in Jurassic Park and across the country, people's reactions to that was. Yeah. Blake, it went so far as to affect QB Brown as well, who ended up tossing Fred VanVleet a Finals MVP vote. Were you surprised at that? And also, surprised that maybe the way Fred kind of took over in that fourth quarter of eventually Finals championship clinching game?
Yeah, I was a little surprised he got a vote. I mean, he played really well, but there was no way that it wasn't going to Kawhi Leonard. And it's great that UB did that. I'm sure Fred appreciates it. I probably would have had Kyle as my number 2 if I didn't have a vote. I don't know. It was just like a funny wrinkle on things. I don't think there was much doubt it was going to Kawhi. But yeah, I think it's a funny side note. But if you zoom out on what that means, and you look at this guy who was in his 3rd year, who was undrafted, who's clearly a part of the Raptors' future, having that big an impact that someone could even consider him as a Finals MVP candidate, that's a huge moment for him, and it's a huge moment for the team.
That Fred, scream that he made, I will say, I've watched the playoffs multiple times now and over again. I obviously know what happened, but watching Fred, elicit that emotion still gets me. Like, I just still feel that every time he does it. Now, this is kind of funny. My brother likens himself to a bit of a clairvoyant in these situations. And around halftime, when the game was still in the balance, he was like, I don't know, Rand, I see Fred screaming. And then he did it, and I was like, come on. It was pretty funny. But yeah, I just think that outburst of emotion, like, that was just like the culmination of being told no, of being, not getting drafted, of not going to a big school, all this kind of stuff. I just felt like that was like, here I am, you are all wrong type thing. And I thought that was just really cool.
Guys, thank you so much. Randy, we appreciate you and the Open Gym crew and everything that you guys do. And it's the reason why we have these types of cool chats and revealing all this great information and behind-the-scenes stuff. So we appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you guys.
And Blake, obviously, make sure you get that subscription to The Athletic. Blake's written for Raptors.com and Raptors905.com in the past and is one of the best in the game. And
absolutely. I second that. Blake's not up and coming. He's been here, and he is amazing, and we love having him on Open Gym.
Thanks for joining us, Blake.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you guys for joining, tuning in. Obviously, next week, we've got a brand new episode. Stay home, stay safe. Thanks, guys.